Good evening, viewers. This is Rabijita Lahkar joining from Balipara Foundation. Today, we welcome everyone. Today's session is a part of the series, The Interdependence of Ecology and Economy. In this session, we will be discussing about the 26th Conference of Parties to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change at Glasgow, which concluded with the signing of the Glasgow Climate Pact. For this, we are truly honored to have our speaker, Mr. Rituraj Phukan, Secretary General of Green Guard Nature Organization, who recently represented India as an official team member on the Climate Force Arctic expedition to the North Polar region. He was the only person from Assam invited to accompany legendary explorers Robert and Barney Swan and a team of scientists, activists, and thought leaders from different climate change impacted regions of the world. He is also the author of the book Fin del Mundo Lessons from the End of the Earth, which is about his journey from Assam to Antarctica to learn about climate change impacts in the polar regions and its implications for the people of this region. I would now like to open the platform to Mr. Phukan. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabijita. It's such a pleasure to be back here with Balipara Foundation. What a journey it has been from the first edition of the Eastern Himalayan Economics Forum. Yeah, my presentation today is about the Glasgow Climate Pact, Ringside Reflections. I was there as an observer of the Citizens Climate Education Corps, and as we all know, the United Nations Climate Framework Convention on Climate Change holds its conferences every year. And this year was the 26th conference. It was supposed to be originally held last year, but was postponed due to the pandemic. Actually, every COP is five COPs. It's not just one. This year at Glasgow, it was COP 26, which is the supreme body of the convention. Then we had the Conference of the Parties serving as meeting to the parties to the Kyoto Protocol or CMP 16. The CME 3, which is the Conference of the Parties serving as meeting of the parties to the Paris Agreement, and the two permanent subsidiary bodies to the convention, that is the subsidiary body for scientific and technology advice, that is the SBSTA, and the subsidiary body for implementation. So besides having a ringside view of the proceedings of the blue zone, I was witness to the anxiety of the youth and the anger of the affected communities. Uh, that's why it made the cops so important. People have been impacted. We have seen all the fires and storms, landslides across the world this summer, with record temperatures all over the seven continents. So, Glasgow was a lot about protest. It was not just the official COP proceedings taking place at the green zone and the blue zone, but across the streets of Glasgow, we were seeing protests every day. I was part of Greta Thunberg's Fridays for Future led uh, protest, where about 25,000 of us gathered at the George Square, and the next day were about 150,000 of us march in the rain from the Calvin Grove Park to the city center. And this continued, as you'll see later, not just on the streets, but inside the negotiation rooms as well. There were a lot of civil society engagements outside of the official venues. I was privileged to be part of some of these, including uh, talking opportunities hosted by Climate Reality UK, at the Climate Cafe, both virtual as in person events. Then there was something called Music for Climate Justice, which was incredibly powerful and which made me feel like there's so much that we can contribute with the indigenous music from our region, which was not there. Obviously, we had indigenous musicians from Brazil, from Indonesia, from Mesoamerica, who were part of these negotiations, who was part of this Music for Climate Justice festival. But sadly, none of the 600 indigenous tribes that are present in India were part of this. I also did a few broadcasts from Glasgow for the Blue Ocean Alliance, as well as Think Tech Hawaii, which was a live television interview. Uh, one of my primary areas of interest is indigenous people. As the founder of the Indigenous Peoples Climate Justice Forum, I took special interest in what is happening with indigenous people and their local communities around the world, and being the most affected constituency, how their impacts have been part of the negotiation process. But during this COP, for the first time in the history of the UNFCCC, 28 indigenous people were nominated from each of the 7 UN indigenous socio-cultural regions to engage directly as knowledge holders and share experiences as indigenous experts with the government. So the Glasgow Pact also recognized the important role of civil society, including youth and indigenous peoples, in addressing and responding to climate change and highlighting the urgent need for action. This, everybody felt, was a very strong achievement and historic progress under the UNFCCC to bring the indigenous knowledge holders to the table to voice their solutions and humanize the impacts of climate change. Uh, and it must be added that governments also recognize the global interlinked crisis of climate change and biodiversity loss and the critical role of nature-based solutions and ecosystem-based approaches in delivering benefits of climate adaptation and mitigation, which I feel Balipara Foundation has been doing from the very first edition of the Eastern Himalayas Naturonomics Forum. I was also part of a few technological exhibits where we are testing out some methods, some interventions to restore the albedo in the Arctic, and we want to test that out in the Eastern Himalayas as well as the entire Hindu Kush Himalayas belt, uh, which involves uh, spreading a very thin layer of silicon that has been specially treated and that has been proved to be harmless in the long run to increase the albedo in areas which have been covered by black soot or carbon, or where the snow has melted away. So this was something that I was proud to be part of and look to bring towards this region. I also had the opportunity to meet some of the top climate scientists, Dr. Catherine Hayhoe, Dr. Mark Muslin, both of who released very impactful books in the recent days. This was a climate justice seminar organized at the Glasgow Calvin College, where I was part of one of the panels, and then Dr. Catherine Hayhoe and Mark Maslin and Dr. Amar Agrakachuk from Iran, all very renowned climate scientists, were part of that. So these deliberations really made me understand a lot of things. This was on the last day of the official negotiations, and learning about the draft Glasgow Pact, all the 6,000 odd observers, accredited observers, actually walked out of the blue zone with that red ribbon you can see in the photograph, and then we symbolically surrounded the blue zone. And this had never happened in the COP. This was quite unexpected, and I think this was one of the motivations for the world leaders to finally arrive at the compromise pact that we call on the next day. If we look back at the goals that was decided by the presidency, uh, firstly, secure global net zero by mid-century and keep 1.5 degrees within reach. Well, in a way, we managed to achieve that, though not as forcefully as one would have thought. Adapt to protect communities and natural habitats. We made some progress on that, but everybody was disappointed by the lack of progress on loss and damage, which is considered to be the third pillar of the Paris Agreement after adaptation and mitigation. Mobilizing finance, that is some one area which is a big disappointment. Personally, I was quite disappointed that rich nations failed to meet their 2009 promise of collectively providing at least US dollar 100 billion a year by 2020, and they could only raise about 85 billion this year. So the bulk of its funding is also in the form of loans, which is again quite disappointing. And the last target was to work together to deliver. I think that is quite an achievement this year, despite the COVID protocols. We had a very inclusive COP. About 30,000 people were able to attend. Unfortunately, not all regions could be represented because of the vaccine problem. Many countries were not able to send the delegates because of a lack of vaccines in those areas. The official outcomes, these are quite well known, so I would not dwell much on this, but of course, this was the first ever global commitment to phase down use of coal. Many countries have been trying to blame India, but originally it was India which was insisting on the inclusion of all fossil fuels, not just coal, in that sentence of phase down. And we must also remember that on the November 10th, the the uh, the impact assessment that was released, the 70th editions of the Climate Change Performance Index that was released by German Watch, Climate Action Network, and the New Climate Institute, named India as the 10th, ranked India in the 10th position, which was way above all the countries which were criticizing us for insisting on the rephrasing from phase out to phase down of coal. There are a lot of other voluntary new commitments, some of which are really encouraging. The United States, European Union, and partners formally launched the Global Methane Pledge, which is an initiative to reduce global methane uh, emissions to keep the goal of limiting warming to 1.5 degrees alive within reach to about a total of 100 countries, representing 70% of the global economy and nearly half of all anthropogenic methane emissions have signed into the pledge. The Powering Past Coal Alliance, which was actually launched in 2017, got a boost with some more countries joining it and some organizations joining it as well. Uh, the Beyond Oil and Gas Alliance, again, it got new concessions, new licensing, and leasing rounds were ended, and then we had the Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero, which represents over 130 trillion of private capital, and then of course the Glasgow Leaders Declaration on Forest and Land Use, which many people have talked about already. Uh, this is something that I just found out today. The Hope sculpture that has been created by artist Stuart Padwick on an old coal mine area on the banks of the Clyde River to commemorate COP26. I think this represents the way forward for me. Although the end result was not what we had expected, I must say that it gives me a lot of hope that we will be able to achieve 1.5 next year or the next. We have built the framework, so we need to move ahead. So I will end with my last slide. Thank you for listening to my ringside view from Glasgow. Thank you, Rabijita. Thank you, Balipara Foundation.
Thank you so much, Mr. Phukan, for giving us some really helpful insights on the Glasgow Pact. We hope we can get you again. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.